Agent to the Stars, Erin Kane is here to talk about Caitlin Clark, Napheesa Collier, and so much more. Locked On Women's Basketball starts now.
Ogunbowale for the win.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Well, hi, everyone, and happy Halloween. I'm Howard Megdal and delighted to be joining you with Locked On Women's Basketball once again. Thank you to all of our listeners. You keep showing up for us like we show up for you 6 days a week, talking about the past, present, and future of women's basketball. I am delighted to tell you that for the 5th month in a row, we are north of 100,000 listeners once again. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every day. And of course, it is not just me. It is the incredible team over at the Next covering this sport with a dedication that just goes beyond anything I can imagine. We're going to have 17 different conference previews getting you ready for women's college basketball starting in earnest next week, although there are the secret scrimmages, there's word trickling out about everything. So make sure you go and subscribe to thenexthoops.com. It's $9 a month, $72 a year, and it supports getting a team of young, diverse people covering this game every single day. And my goodness, not a moment goes by that we are not covering someone of the galaxy of stars that Erin Kane represents over at Excel. Erin is somebody, if you just give me a moment of point of personal privilege, who does this for the right reasons and is building the infrastructure in women's basketball and women's sports. So, Erin, I am honored to have you on the program. It is always great to chat with you. And the place I think we want to start is one of your kind of under the radar clients that people aren't really talking about. Caitlin Clark, I think she plays in Iowa. Is that true? Is she's at Iowa?
Rumor has it. But can I just start with thank you for having me here.
Of course.
And I love the show intro. It starts with Ogunbowale, like it starts with Arike shot. So
I will tell you, just full disclosure. So Arike, and we have her highlighted at the top of the show. We've had Napheesa Collier on the program, another client here several times, and Fia's talked about I feel like it's an endorsement of our show and what we do, that Fia is willing to come be part of our show, even though we begin with that particular highlight.
Yes. She jokes, the emotional damage joke when that highlight comes up. But no, I mean, just obviously amazing to work with Caitlin, Fia, Arike, all like super incredible athletes. And Fia and Arike have just gone on to have these like unbelievable pro careers beyond college. So fun to see how that's evolved.
It's been beautiful to see. They were both drafted a little later than they should have been. They are proving people wrong day in and day out. We're going to start in segment one. We're going to talk about Caitlin Clark, of course, and how this came about and what the plan is. Segment two, we're not going to get to everyone, so we'll have to have you back. But we got to talk about Fia, what she's doing with Unrivaled. Arike, obviously, I always want some good NaLyssa Smith talk too, so we'll find a way a little bit of everything. Yeah. But to start out, and this was big news. We know this, that a few years ago, trying to figure out how and when players sign with agents was a complicated business. That even though we were living in a moment where players deserved to be represented and needed to be represented in order to have their interests best aligned with their futures, that there was this gap. And so now to have Caitlin Clark be able to figure out, even as her national profile has exploded, what she's able to do. Take me through, I guess, two parts. One is like, what was your kind of pitch to her about where she ought to position herself? And then more to the point, how do you figure that out when we are in such a Wild West time between NIL and everything going on with the NCAA at this moment?
Well, look, it's a more complicated question to answer than you would think. But I'm on an incredible team of people at Excel that's working with Caitlin. So Alan Zucker is one of our partners at Excel. He's the I will say, preeminent sports marketer, for many, many years. And among his clients are, Peyton and Eli Manning, and just really like incredible talents. And he's done a brilliant job for them. And Caitlin is so special, and everybody can see it. I mean, that's part of what makes her so amazing and interesting and transcendent. And so, I think the conversations from our team were initiated with Alan, and we're very much about, not that she needs to be elevated, right? Like, she's doing this herself, her play, her way of dealing with media, like her approach to her community service, like all the things she's already doing through and surrounded by her family were just incredible. But I do think, the benefit of signing with someone or a company like Excel and someone like Alan and me and the team and Colleen Garrity, the team we have around her, is that it provides a little bit more access and guidance to some other things that might not happen just organically. And so I think the plan always has been, and even in the press release and starting with that, we see her as on a par with these just incredibly transcendent elite athletes of all time. And so being able to provide kind of additional access to that and some of the resources, and even, this business has existed for many decades. And so understanding like the best practices and how to continue to help her. Oh, sorry. How to continue. There's no way to turn that sound off and also keep the sound on. So
all good.
But how to continue to keep her on the incredible path that she's on, and support and amplify all the things she's already doing.
I mean, to that point, and again, this goes back to the way we talked about your work up top, is that you have spent your life treating women in sports like the same profile that men in sports get. And so you're right. Caitlin resonates differently, right? I have a friend who is a casual observer of women's basketball who's saying, my wife and I want to get tickets. When is Caitlin Clark coming to town? My daughter, who is a very, very passionate basketball fan, cannot wait to see Caitlin Clark in person. And so, resonating across the spectrum in that way. From your perspective, how much does it feel like a chance to be able to work with somebody who is in a lot of ways redefining the way in which we think of the audience for a women's basketball player? I mean, 10 million people seeing that national championship game, that number is a huge number.
It's so fun. I mean, there's no, like, this is what you sort of live for. I was in the arena for those games, and the audience was visibly different than past women's Final Fours. And that was stunning to have the change be that kind of immediate and that present. But I just remember sitting in the stands and looking around and going, this is a different crowd, and this is interesting. And I mean, look, as you very generously said, I have always thought that women deserve all the same resources, the same infrastructure, the same everything that the men get. And so to have somebody who casual fans are like engaged with, she's bringing people to the game. I mean, I just think we've already seen this. We've had like a taste of this previously with Sabrina Ionescu and some of these other players that have come up. And so there's just this groundswell of support for the women's game that, like, who's not excited about that? It's so fun. And Caitlin just partnered with State Farm. I love that the CMO of State Farm is a former college women's basketball player and has like this personal affinity and connection to Caitlin through that. It's such an incredibly exciting trend in our sport. For so many years, those CMO roles and the decision makers in those roles didn't have that personal connectivity to women's sports. And so that changed, whether it's at State Farm or Tashunda Brown Duckett or any of these other folks who just feel a personal connection to it, but also really fundamentally, just as part of their DNA, understand how impactful this is.
Mm-hmm.
And then to get to work with Caitlin and kind of bring some of those things to life is just, it's thrilling. It's thrilling for the whole sport. It's exciting for me. It's exciting for our team. It's exciting for, we excel. And I have to shout out this company because I think one of the things that's wonderful about Excel is that they see women's sports the same way I do.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is to build on the women's side of things exactly the same way they built an incredible practice in the NBA, and by providing the same resources and the same tools around the players that we have.
It's not a magic trick. You just do the work and you invest. It is a beautiful thing to see. Well, so I've got a little more on Caitlin along with Fee and Arike as well here in segment 2. But first, I want to talk to you guys at home about FanDuel. And FanDuel has a really interesting offer right now. They are America's #1 sports book, and the NFL season offer these opportunities. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. So in other words, if your team wins, you don't just get the $5 back, you get $150 as well. You can bet on essentially anything. There's spreads, there's player props, over-unders, and much more. So there are a couple of ways to do it. You can get the app. You can go to FanDuel.com/locked-on to help celebrate the NFL season. Again, that's FanDuel.com/LOCKEDON. I will tell us, specific to our audience, FanDuel has a lot of women's sports offerings, and we are seeing some equality there as well, and it's about time. FanDuel.com/locked-on. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NFL. So as we think about Caitlin and State Farm, and again, it's funny when we talk about those brands because, right, having that C-suite representation matters. And it matters in both directions. It matters for people in the room who don't have to be educated about what this means, and they can come to understand it. And it matters also because you're going to say, all right, here's the way in which something like this can resonate. I know it's like a small thing, a silly thing, but like Caitlin getting the khaki pants, that being the design by which this happened. Like, was she excited about it? Were you guys excited about it? You have sort of this on par right away here with, people like Chris Paul, people who have been, at the forefront for State Farm for a long time.
Of course. I mean, State Farm advertising and in sports they're one of the blue chip brands. So, and we certainly see that alignment with her as making with Caitlin as making a ton of sense. So it is exciting. And the ads are always really well done and very funny. And the khaki pants is, it's a very cute idea. And the other thing is, and we look at this with all of our clients, is helping bring them to life for people beyond the uniform, right? Like more than the uniform. What does it mean to be behind the scenes, to be a Division I student athlete, pursuing a professional career and having a family and doing work in the community? And so I know the khaki pants are kind of a uniform, but it's a different kind of uniform. So we love it. We think the creative from State Farm we thought was really funny and charming, and we loved it for her. So
it's great to see. And again, people are going to get to know, and this is the other part of it, right? Representation matters, and making sure that Caitlin Clark is part of those opportunities is critical. It also is critical that people get to know her. I had the privilege of getting to speak to her for the book I was working on about Minnesota women's basketball. And she talked about growing up as a Lynch fan and growing up watching those teams. And when you hear her talk about the sport and the way she connects to it, it's so relatable in all these ways. She doesn't just play the game with an evident joy. That joy kind of permeates through the way she feels about the game. So I'm excited. I'm really excited to see the way in which her profile keeps building, because it's different, right? She doesn't have just a local NIL potential presence. She has a national NIL presence now. And as we head into, which will probably be the subject of future conversations about a very, very important time in WNBA history and women's basketball writ large, it's going to be fascinating to see the part she plays, just as it's going to be fascinating to see the part that Napheesa Collier plays. And so, listeners of the show know I always like to talk to and about Fee. And Fee just had a first-team All-WNBA season, something that should not go under the radar. Fee doesn't do things halfway either. So we've got Unrivaled, the potential new league. And I know that there's a runway for it. Kind of take us through what you're seeing from it at this point, where it stands, and the way in which that fits in. I know Fee at exit interviews told us we're looking at 2025 as a start. Alarm bells go off when you hear that, because 2025, that's when the new media rights deal comes in the WNBA. That's potentially around the time, if the players opt out, and there's an expectation that will happen, that there'll be a negotiation. So that feels very fortuitous. Is that the way you guys see it in terms of positioning it?
Yes. But you just asked me a yes or no question.
I know.
I'm just going to go yes. No, but I do like what you covered in there. I want to just say a few things. First of all, to wrap up on Caitlin and her fandom of the Lynx, I love when I meet a young women's basketball player whose parents have taken them to see WNBA games. It's not always possible because where the teams are or things like that. But for me, one of the important things in women's basketball is connecting past, present, and future. And because of the way the league has been covered or the lack of coverage, sometimes that there's a disconnect there. But meeting with Caitlin and hearing her say who her favorite players were, and, it's Maya Moore and Napheesa Collier, and, a number of other WNBA players, it made me really excited. And, that connectivity, also I think you can tell a lot about somebody by who they choose as their favorite players. And so that connectivity to those two especially made me, really happy. They're obviously incredible. And Fee, yes. So Unrivaled, obviously incredible idea. What I love seeing is people out there trying to solve the problems that WNBA players face, and who better to inform those solutions than WNBA players themselves, and kind of take a leadership role in that and ownership stake clearly in providing those solutions. So I know there were a ton of conversations, a lot of really thoughtful conversations about what a successful kind of supplemental league could look like. We obviously already have Athletes Unlimited operating, which is an incredible endeavor and effective in so many ways. The challenge for that league is that you have these players who stand to make hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars by going overseas, and it's very difficult to give that up for a smaller paycheck, especially if you have families to provide for. And I mean, your playing years, an athlete's career is limited, right? So you got to
narrow window. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So trying to come up with a solution that's really viable for those higher earning players in the WNBA off season. I mean, we've got we've got the player marketing agreements too, which have been effective, but there are only so many of those every year. So how do we, what's the next step? What's the next opportunity that can keep players here and keep them really earning? And so Fee and her business partners and Stewie really put their heads together and came up with what I think is a really incredible and kind of enticing plan for what that could look like. And because the two of them too, I think they got really quick buy-in from other players, Yeah. And I know that they've been, we all would like everything to happen as quickly as possible, but a reasonable timeline to pull something like this off is 2025. And I think it's also fortuitous considering the other issues you just mentioned, which is the CBA opt-out and, the 2024 is an Olympic year. It's not a great year to kind of kick something like that off where sponsors and, kind of brand partners might be already taken out of the mix because they have Olympic obligations and so forth. So love the timing, super excited about all the pieces they're putting into place. It's obviously, you can imagine, a lot of work to get something like that up and running. So, everybody's working hard to make that happen.
It's infrastructure. And again, I'm going to come back in segment 3. We're going to talk infrastructure. I want to mention overtime as well. There's never enough time to talk about all the things you're doing, Erin Kane. But hold on one sec. First, I want to tell everyone at home about Game Time. So Game Time is, we are a sports family, we are a theater family, we are a live music and events family. So we're a Game Time family because Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. It's one thing to see on the stadium seating. All right, this is where the seat is. Game Time gives you a picture so you're able to see exactly what your view is. I wanted to make sure that my younger daughter is comfortable, is happy with the view that she's able to see when she goes to watch basketball with me. For father-daughter trips out there, for my older who wants to go to concerts or to theater, and my wife as well, making sure, all right, this is the view that we're looking to do. It gives you that opportunity. There are last-minute seats, so sometimes when we find ourselves suddenly with a free weeknight, we live right out of Philly, there's so much going on. Game Time has deals right up to the start of the event. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Now, again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So as we think through those structures, and again, overtime is creating a summer league as well for women who are coming up through what is now it feels like an increasingly built out pipeline. It feels like part of the same project, part of the same idea as Unrivaled in my view. And I wonder how much, from your perspective, it does feel to you like you're building the plane while you're flying the plane in a lot of these instances, and how you sort of navigate those two things for yourself.
I don't know how to answer that question. Look, I consider myself incredibly fortunate that I'm working in this space at a time when so many exciting things are happening.
Right.
So like the conversations, I was down at Overtime in Atlanta a couple of years ago now for an Overtime elite experience, and sat down and had a really, in-depth conversation with a couple folks from Overtime, and just said, love what you're doing in the men's space. I know I'm not the only one having these conversations with them, but love what you're doing in the men's space. Like, what's the plan for girls? Because you can't just duplicate what you're doing for the guys.
Right.
That, there's no one and done. You can't create an alternative to the G. Like, what are you doing for the girls? It's a completely different consideration set and different set of problems. And they, I think at the time they were a little bit stumped, but thoughtful about that idea of this is a different consideration set. And one of the things I think Overtime has been very good at doing over the years is listening to people in the marketplace, listening to the consumers, and listening to the kind of key people that can help them inform. I mean, Zach is very, very good at that. And so they went on a listening tour of like, what are the problems? What can be solved? And then thought about how they could be additive, what would work for their existing business. And, they've come up with this Overtime Select concept. And I am excited about it. I love the pipeline. Like I saw firsthand, and Zia Cook is one of their success stories, right? So she, had these kind of viral moments as a high school athlete, and that really informed her NIL. I mean, her marketability in the NIL space in college, and how much the audience she had been able to amass through that, and then through her continued success and on the court, informed her partnerships while she was in college. So, I see that and think we need to be looking at this at every stage of the career of an athlete's career. And so very excited to be involved in Overtime Select, and happy to, to lend myself to that, because I think it ultimately creates, that groundswell we were talking about at the beginning of this, that these athletes like Caitlin Clark are catalyzing, sparking in college. Like let's go back even a little bit earlier. Who are these kind of standouts that are super fun to watch and that we should be looking for? And, and then we can follow their college careers, and then we can follow them, hopefully into the WNBA. And I love that continuity, and that storytelling is just wonderful for women's sports.
It's all the same story. That's the thing. And so, again, just even to bring it full circle, and it goes back to your client base, you don't have these one-size-fits-all solutions. You've got Arike playing overseas. NaLyssa Smith was a star at AU, and she has herself been on the program and talked about the way in which that built her to have what was a really excellent season this year that people should not overlook. And Unrivaled, and building something new in the process, and what Caitlin is doing at the collegiate level, and figuring out how and when you make that jump. I'm going to just ask you to put on your prediction hat, and you and I are having a conversation in 2026. Is the solution by then, there's a new CBA, so there's a significant amount more of media money from the media rights deal, so the solutions are more piecemeal? Are all the things that are happening right now going to be part of the landscape in 2026 and more? Like, how do you view what women's basketball should look like 3 years from now? And how will it be different, and how will it be the same? I know it's a crazy broad question, but I'm curious. I don't need a full landscape, but what are the biggest takeaways you think?
Well, I mean, 3 years I actually think is like a really short timeline.
Yeah.
So I don't know that it's going to look that different. I think your point about, in 3 years we'll be through the new WNBA media rights deal, and hopefully through another collective bargaining agreement. So hopefully at the professional level, players are making more base comp, more money just to begin with, which changes the landscape in terms of like overseas and the incentive to stay in the US. I mean, who knows if the player marketing program will be extended or expanded in the new collective bargaining agreement. I think all of those things inform a lot, but my hope is the landscape gets more crowded. The just in terms of looking back at the history of sports, that's what you see this expansion and then consolidation. And so I don't know if in 3 years we'll be in consolidation mode yet, but I think in women's sports more is better. And so I'm all for any way that there can be more and more quality.
100% on all counts. Listen, listeners, Erin's very busy. She's already given us way too much time, as you can hear the calls.
Sorry.
But not at all. Erin Kane, it is always a delight to chat with you. To our listeners, I thank you for being with us every day. Nikki Collin will be joining us tomorrow, the Baylor head coach, of course, and many more guests as we simultaneously ramp up for the WNBA draft lottery, for women's college basketball, for overseas, for everything. You can be sure Erin Kane has her hand in all of it. Thank you to everyone. Have a wonderful Halloween. May all of your doors be treats, not tricks.
Ogunbowale for the win.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.